Hello everyone. So today is time for a wrap up for the books I read in November. So I didn't read as much as normal, I think just because of the new job was quite all consuming, but I still got to read some things, so I wanted to talk about them. And the first one is A General Theory of Oblivion by Jose Eduardo Agalusa, which is an Angolan book I read because of Invisible Cities. And basically, this book is about this woman that goes through a traumatic event and decides to lock herself up in her apartment. And while she's locked up in her apartment, a lot of things are going on in Angola. There is the independence and civil war and all of these kind of things, and she kind of gets snippets of it. But overall, like she didn't experience it firsthand, so it's quite an interesting new way of telling a story, and I think it was very innovative, and I enjoyed that. I also got a lot more about the outside world than I thought. We were, as readers, not limited to the perspective of this woman. It was more of a we got more context on that. And I appreciated that because I learned a lot about the country as well. So yeah, it was interesting. Also, I have to say, like the tone of the book was very whimsical and very magical and like heartwarming sometimes, even though it was about like independence and war and agoraphobia. It was not very depressing or very suffocating. It was more of a very whimsical, magical approach to it, which yeah, it was very nice, I think. But if you want to know more about it, I also have a full review of it, so I will link it down below. The next book I read was Secrets of the Seven Smallest States of Europe by Thomas Eccardt, which I read for my Read Around the World project. And because of these small countries, I couldn't find books that they were a reasonable price for me to buy. I just decided to get this non-fiction about them, even though the writer was not from them. And it covered Andorra, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, San Marino, Vatican City, Monaco, and Malta. And there was a lot of information, and I like that at the beginning he had like a first part of the book was about the similarities and differences of these countries and why there might be a reason why these smaller countries exist and how they survive, and if there is any commonality on those terms. And then the second part was more about going country by country and giving some facts and some information about each country. So yeah, overall I like the idea, and I think it gave me a better idea of these little countries that most people don't know much about. But I also have to say that the writer was American, and it came through quite a lot in several places. And one thing that particularly bothered me was the fact that he talked about the languages of some countries like they are just dialects, and like for example Luxembourgish, it's a language, but he treated it as a dialect, and that bothered me quite a bit because I think it's quite of a very US centric way to look at languages. I think in Europe we do have more of a sensibility of smaller differences that still make a language and doesn't mean that it's just a dialect. So yeah, it was not perfect, but I did learn things. I still want to read from those countries, but as I said, it's very difficult to get hold of books from there, so it is what it is. The next book I read was Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch by Rivka Galchen, and this one was also kind of not whimsical, but it was funny and heartwarming in a way. It's about Johannes Kepler's mother, and it's based on true historical events. So Johannes Kepler was a very famous astronomer that was also doing astrology on the side to earn money, and his mother was charged with being a witch, and that happened in real life. So this book is written from the point of view of Johannes Kepler's mom. Um, and it was very funny and very poignant, and the commentary that it was given, and it was written in a very modern style. It didn't try to be like historically accurate with the language, and it just felt it was more relatable that way. And it kind of made that point of looking at the persecution of witches back then, and how that kind of translates to the current way of things. We obviously don't burn witches anymore, but we do sort of prosecute people for things that we imagine are there and not really are. So yeah, I did love the commentary. I did love the humor, and yeah, it was a good book. Then the next one I read was the Granta book of the African short story, and this I read for my TBR tackle prompt for November. I do have a video for that as well, and I just have to say I just don't get along with short stories. They just don't give me enough. There is not enough plot. There is not enough character development. There is not enough exploration of deep topics in any way. And it just don't, they are never memorable for me. So yeah, they were not bad. I don't think they were bad stories. I think it was interesting, and I especially like the introduction of this book because it did go through some modern African writers and what is the scene at the moment and why not many of them write short stories, and that was interesting to read. But the stories themselves, I don't think they were bad. I just don't get along with them. So yeah, that's how things are. Then the next one I read was To the Lake by Kapka Kassabova, and this is kind of a memoir historical book, non-fiction. So Kapka Kassabova is from New Zealand, but her family originally is from Macedonia, North Macedonia, and she goes back to North Macedonia to reconnect with her family and look back at her roots basically. And it's like it talks at the same time it does focus on the people that she meets and how they treat her and how the culture affects those interactions. For example, she was talking about the fact that even though she has never met any of these people before, they treat her like family the moment that she says she is the daughter or the granddaughter of a certain person, because then they are kind of related, and that just makes the whole thing a lot more familiar, stuff like that. There's a lot of talk about that kind of interaction, but also a lot about the history. So her family is from North Macedonia, but her parents flew to Bulgaria when there was a war and dictatorship, and then from Bulgaria they went to New Zealand. So she does have all of these connections, and also she's from this part of Macedonia where there are two big lakes that are on the border with Albania. And she also talks about how Albania historically has been trying to make North Macedonia part of Albania, which I didn't know that Albania had those like conqueror kind of tendencies, but apparently they do. So there is a lot of interactions that we explore in this book between the political situation on that area of the world. There was not as much about Greece, even though North Macedonia does have a border with Greece. It was much more about Bulgaria and Albania because apparently those are the ones that have affected them more. But still, it was very interesting. I mean, I didn't know anything about North Macedonia, so this was very interesting, and it makes me want to read more about the area because I think, like the way it was written, also was very engaging and it was very clear and easy to follow. And I just feel like there's so much more to explore there, and I want to know more, which I think is a sign of a good book. And the next book I read was Hotel Silence by Augur Ava Olafsdottir. And this is another of those weirdly whimsical, warm books about really hard topics. So this is about a man that discovers something about his family, and then he decides that he doesn't want to live anymore, and instead of killing himself, he decides to move to a war zone, and then he kind of expects that he will die there because it's dangerous. um, so that's like the premise of the book, and then we see this man in this new place, in this war zone, sort of making friends and helping these people by accident almost. And it's just very heartwarming the way it's written. To me, it felt like if a man called Uwe moves to a war zone, and then you have that kind of grumpy, I don't want to be here old man combined with I actually do care about people, and it's just ingrained in my being to be caring, even though if I don't show it in a very, I don't know, very close way. So yeah, that was Hotel Silence, and yeah, I like the book. I think it was a some sort of palate cleanser, which again, it's weird to say about a book about war, but yeah, it was kind of very heartwarming and something a little bit more light in some way. Um, then I read Bolla by Pajtim Statovci, I think, I hope. Um, and this book, so the author is from Finland, but his parents are from Kosovo, from Albanian um, heritage, I think. And that's kind of like what sets the book. So the book is it's mostly set in Kosovo, but the main protagonists have Albanian heritage or are ethnically Albanian. Um, and this is so it's about a man that is gay, but it's not accepted at the time. That's a possibility. So it's like late 90s, early 2000s. He marries and has children, and then there is war in Kosovo, so he has to flee from Kosovo to another country, but he gets into issues there, and also he has a relationship that he really appreciates in Kosovo, but he has to break that up to prioritize his family over his lover, who really really loves him, and he loves him as well. So that's yeah, that's the mindset of the book, and obviously it's very this one was not a heartwarming one. This person is very unlikable, first of all, because the way that he treats his wife and his children, and the way that he talks about his children, I understand that it's not something that he necessarily wanted to choose for himself. It's more of a cultural thing that he kind of not forced, it was forced to do, but kind of expected to do. But still, the way that he talks about them is quite demeaning, and the way that he treats other people. Also, when he goes to this new country, when they flee, um, it's not nice. He's not a nice person. But the thing that is it's very powerful about the book, I think, is that even though he's not a very likable character, you understand, because it is the book is written in like the main narrative, and then we have flashbacks to kind of understand the character and how he got there, not justify but understand. So he was abused as a child, and that also develops certain behaviors. He was really in love with this man that he had to abandon for his children, children that he necessarily didn't want to have, and all of these things are, yeah, they are woven in a way that makes you have a very full picture of this character, and I think that's the strength of this book. But yeah, he was not likable, and his situation was very difficult as well. Um, so it was not exactly an enjoyable read in the sense of it was fun to read, but it was very powerful, I think, in the message that it was trying to send, and it was done very, very well. And it is just amazing that the author was able to pack so many topics and so many powerful statements and powerful messages in such a short book. This is a very short book. I think it's less than 200 pages, and it still packed so much. So yeah, it was a very interesting read. And the last book that I read this in audio, and it was Brown Baby by Nikesh Shukla. And this is a sort of a memoir kind of book. So Nikesh Shukla, as far as I understand, he is from Indian and African descent, mostly Indian, but also African. Um, and he married a white woman, and they had a child. And this book is written to that child. It's a girl, and I think she's around 4 years old when this book was written, or kind of, yeah. The anecdotes stop around 4 or 5 years old, and I think it's good. I think like the writing and everything was good, but I think I loved it because it was so relatable to me. I don't know if someone with different life experiences will have the same reaction to it, but for me it was just like it hit all the spots basically. So he talks about how it's about racism. He talks about how brown babies are never like, they can be black, they can be mixed race, they can be brown, they can never be white. Even though half of them is white, like half of their heritage is white, how is it possible that they are called black even though they're half black? But not white. They have the same percentage, right? So he talks about things like that. He also talks about the fact that his wife and him decided that they didn't want to over gender their child, and it was a worry that they had going through parenthood, that she was going to grow up thinking that she had to be pretty, and that was her point in life, and do all the stereotypical girly things, which is something that also is something that I think about. I mean, if she truly wants that, I have no problem with that, but it is very difficult to determine if it's something that she really wants because she really wants it, or it's something that society is pushing on her. And you have to constantly like check yourself and check your environment to see like if she is really being pressured to be someone that she doesn't really want to be. And he also talks about how, for example, they dress her in what I and him could call gender neutral clothes, and that meant that she was constantly misgendered, which happens to me all the time as well. And I have stopped correcting most people. So yeah, it happens because she's not dressed in pink and flowery stuff, and then automatically she's a boy. That happens to me all the time as well. He talks about a lot of useless parenting advice he got. He talks also about what he felt when he became a parent, and what like there are so many mixed emotions on that, because he said, and that's something also I identify with, that he didn't necessarily not want to have kids, but he didn't kind of see the point. All the extra work and all of that, he didn't see the point, and that's something I also felt at some point before being a mother. He also talks about the nationality of the child and the fact that she's British, but she has all this heritage behind, and how silly it is to have to be forced to only have one nationality. And I mean, those are all things that apply to me as well. So yeah, it was just very interesting. And I think it's something that I might want to reread at some point, because it hits so many spots on the things that I also have experienced as a parent. So yeah, that was a very good book for me personally. I don't know if it will work for everybody. I think it's useful for everybody to read it and have that perspective of all the different things that come into being the parent of a brown child, and being the parent of a girl. But it just probably it's not going to be as impactful to other people that don't have those life experiences. So yeah, those are all the books that I read this month. Let me know if you have read any of them or if you want to read any of them in the comments below, and until next video, bye!